Well, do you need to move and go to another bank? Today, we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Listen, if you've got a question, and I'd love to hear from you today, all you have to do is go to the top of the webpage at prudentmoney.com and send a question in through the Ask Bob, and we'll get you taken care of. I've just had some great conversations with listeners. Would love to hear from you. I think that people sometimes don't want to send because they think send an email because they think we're too busy for them, or maybe whatever the what's holding them back. I got to tell you, we are here to help you. If you've got a question, make sure that you send it in because we do want to take good care of you, and we can do that at prudentmoney.com. Before we go on to the topic, actually it's a continuation from yesterday that what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in the Middle East. Of course, we're under a ceasefire because, as typical with a ceasefire, it's there to cool the tensions down, the stress down, and for everybody to stop shooting at each other. And so it's just as the name would say, a ceasefire. What typically happens is that the two sides do end up coming together at the negotiation table, and they argue, fight, negotiate. They walk away from the table. All the drama is there. They come back to the table, and then they end up kicking the ball down the road and agreeing that they're not going to come up with it today. This is something that's going to take, a few years. Which, by the way, agreements like this, and like we've talked about it from the standpoint of tariff agreements, take a lot longer than you might think. They're not just something that gets established in 30 days and gets signed in 60. We're talking 2 or 3 years, 2 or 3 year time period. So the thought that Iran and the U.S. are going to, especially as combative as Iran is still being, then it's probably a slim to zero chance of this getting done the way wars typically play out, which is they start talking about an agreement, and it lasts for 2 to 3 years, and they finally get it signed, and then at some point one or the other countries violate the agreement, and they start all over again. And this happens decade after decade after decade. And in typical form, that's what you see happen. Sure, there's some shots fired every once in a while, but for the most part, things get worked out because it's all about saving face. It's about a country looking strong, not looking weak. You got two countries at the negotiation table, so both of them have got to look strong. Not that easy, but that's typically what has happened, and that's why I believe that this is not bothering the market until starting to today, where the market's looking at this and going, "Boy, this is not good," and it's not good. Because we are seeing and you can go to Middle East news coverage, and you can see the Iranians are digging their heels in, and there has not been any break from that. And in fact, there was a headline on that before I came on to do the program that says something like Iran is, even though we're in a ceasefire, we are still at war. I mean, you just don't say that kind of thing. And of course, this doesn't really go well, I don't think, with Trump's style, with his negotiation style, because he puts an ultimatum down, and that just doesn't work hasn't worked with Iran. And so he ends up walking it back. So here we are. And nothing's really happening except what is happening. And all you have to do is read a lot of the news releases to see this, both on our side and their side. Things are bubbling up from the bottom of the pit, is the best way to put it. And it looks like that things are about to blow up. And it's what's quiet is kind of like the quiet before the storm. And so we'll see what happens. I certainly hope not. I would rather see them kick the ball down to the end of the corner and buy some time. But you see, I don't think we've got that luxury anymore. I think that it's all about nuclear capabilities and war and annihilation of countries, and so here we are. So not good. We'll see how it carries out. And I can't imagine the president kicking the can down the road again as far as the ceasefire goes and continuing to put it off. And then, of course, you've got, and I wrote this letter to my clients talking about this last week, is that you got the he said, she said this, when they're both looking at each other and say, you're lying, no, you're lying, and on it goes. So this is where we are, and this is why I cannot stress enough that it's so very important to understand what kind of risk you're taking in your portfolio, because and I talked about this yesterday, if there's a risk spectrum, the outcome is extreme risk and extreme reward on opposite ends of the spectrum. And if you don't get and Wall Street's just banking on extreme reward. They're always banking on extreme reward. And they follow that conviction all the way down to the bottom when a bear market has started, and they're just not accepting it, and then continues to lose money and continues to lose money. And of course, that's obviously we're not seeing that right now, but it is definitely on the table, I think, along with the many other situations that could occur because of all this. So, it is what. If you've got any questions about your 401ks, about what you're doing with your investments, you can always go to the Ask Bob section and send it on our way. Now, let's talk a little bit about, let me back up. Yesterday we talked about the problem bank list and the banks that make that list, and of course they don't give the names of the bank for fear of a bank run, and that's a very serious slippery slope they got to be very careful with, and not to spook the public. And the reality of it is that these banks will get on this list, and it's kind of that there's a problem, let's work it out, let's get you into a good place, then we'll get you off the list. That's what that troubled bank list is for. Now, most people won't see it that way. If it were a situation where they found out their bank was on that list, they'd probably get out of there. But there's like 60 banks that I believe 50 to 60 banks that are on the recent list of 2025 to 2026. To bring this into perspective, why and this is what we talked about yesterday, is that you have a lot of people, the gloom and doom crowd, that's saying, "Hey, this is not good. Banks are at crisis." No, they're not. At least that's what these numbers are saying. Keep an eye on it, no question, but they're not saying crisis by any means. So don't feel like that you've got to go run and change your bank just because of somebody that's claiming that, wanting to sell you a newsletter or a subscription or something. So we're at about 60 banks on the troubled bank list. The 2009 to 2012, right following the crisis, the financial crisis, there was consistently 700 to 800 banks on that list. So let's keep it all into perspective. And most, I think the most banks at any given time that happened in 2011. There was 888 banks, and most of those banks did not fail. Many recovered, merged, or were recapitalized. And the best way to put this, the list is simply an early warning system, not a failure system. And I think that it's real. You have to be pretty motivated to change a bank, because, and of course I'm sure it was on purpose, but banks will set up all these bank wires and automatic drafts and withdrawals and all these things that just happen when you sleep. And you think about, do I really want to undo all those things? Or you have a bank like Wells Fargo who's got tidbit of a checkered past, to put it lightly. and you look at them and you go, boy, I don't want to be with a bank like that, but I'm just so tied into this bank. If a bank is taking good care of you and you see nothing, and granted, I'm not excusing some of the things they've done because they've done some pretty questionable, actually broke the law. I mean, if you call identity theft that. And but you got to look at it from the standpoint of, do I feel comfortable and safe here? And that's what and we're going to look at that. So once again, why individual banks are not named and not disclosed on that, and that's not a red flag. That's always been that way. It's really to prevent depositor panic, and this gives regulators time to stabilize and resolve what has put them on that list to begin with. Now, let's take a look at the 5 largest banks in the United States. This is total assets. Let's start with number 5, Goldman Sachs. Now, you might think Goldman Sachs, that's on a bank list? I didn't ever think of Goldman Sachs as a bank. And that is something that the government did during the financial crisis to stabilize the crisis and everything that was happening. They turned investment banks into banks so that they could have the same protection. And so all these investment, Merrill Lynch is on. Of course, they were bought by Bank of America. But if you remember back, that was a pretty crisis-oriented time, and they had to do some extreme things. Some things, that the government stepped in and did during the 2008 financial crisis, I agree with. Some things I think they went too far. I remember covering this day by day, and just blown away by what was happening, because we really never have seen this kind of intervention. But that's why we have to. When you deal with as much debt as we're dealing with here, the crisis situations tend to get a whole lot worse. We'll get into that in a second. The top 5 banks. This is Bob Brooks. We're up against a break. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory and the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me or a comment, whatever is on your mind, go to the website, prudentmoney.com. Go up to the top of the website. There is a link to the Ask Bob section, and we'll take good care of you. Just send that question in, and we'll answer it. We won't stick it. It won't go into a big black hole or anything like that. It will be there. We'll answer it. We'll take care of it. And if you need to point you in the direction of resources or whatever, we can do that for you. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. And make sure that you sign up for the Prudent Money e-letter. That is content that we put out on the web. We want to make sure that you know about it. We're about to start some pretty cool things and some more consistency of getting information out to you. So you'll want to know when that hits the website, and you can go check that out. Of course, we do have every one of our programs we create a podcast out of it, and we post that to wherever you enjoy listening to your podcast content. So I think we're on just about every platform. So that's there for you as well. And if you ever miss a part of the program, you can always go back and listen to it. And good way to do it on your own time. That's the great thing about podcasts. So that's all. Check that all out at the website, www.prudentmoney.com, or where you enjoy listening to your podcast content. Now, the top 5 banks. If you would have asked me this question probably back during the financial crisis, I don't think that I had some real concerns about the big banks. And of course, I could express those concerns on the radio. But the government's everybody's fine. Nobody's having a problem. But that wasn't necessarily the truth. Today, banks are well capitalized, and I think as far as with $37 trillion worth of debt in the system, you're only as strong as you can be. But basically, I think that the top 5 banks are pretty solid from the standpoint. And that is not a recommendation to go to one, move your money, or anything like that. I'm just telling you what I think. I don't think that I would have said this during the financial crisis. I was very concerned with what was happening. I'll tell you one bank here, we'll get to in a minute, that had some real serious problems. But Goldman Sachs is number 5. They have, and we look at the assets of the bank, $1.7 trillion. They primarily focus on investment banking, trading, and asset management. Of course, they came from that side of the ledger. Number 4, total assets of $1.9 trillion goes to Wells Fargo. Historically, they're dominant in mortgages and consumer banking, which really reflects the problems that they've had, and a lot of the questionable dealing with their customers and setting up accounts in their names and all kinds of different stories. Number 3 is a very interesting bank. Assets $2.4 trillion, known for its international presence in institutional banking, which is Citigroup. And Citigroup, I don't have these numbers off the top of my head, but it'll give you a good idea. Somewhere in the mid-2000s, Citigroup grew price share wise to something like over $300 a share. I'm just using this for illustration. I know I'm not right on these numbers, but it's pretty close. And I'll look them up and tell them talk about them tomorrow. So they topped. I think this was before maybe in 2007, and they continued. They dropped. I mean, Citigroup was just one of the hot stocks, just like our Nvidia and some of these other tech stocks. It fell from that top all the way down to, I believe, the teens, maybe $18, $17 a share through the financial crisis. Almost went out of business and came back. And it's a long story how they came back. But it would blow your mind and it all started with a change in the government accounting system that made them a different looking bank. And don't really have time to go into that. But anyway, Citigroup is $2.4 trillion. Bank of America is massive retail footprint. The Merrill Lynch, I don't think they're Merrill Lynch anymore, maybe Merrill Wealth Division, brings their assets up to $3.2 trillion. Really, probably the only bank that has brought in Merrill. The government, I won't say forced them to do that, to take on Merrill Lynch, but we'll just say they encouraged them to take on Merrill Lynch. And I think it's been a great deal for them. But Bank of America sits at $3.2 trillion. That's the number 2 bank. Number 1 bank is J.P. Morgan Chase. Assets, $3.9 trillion. Largest U.S. bank by a wide margin. strong across investment banking, consumer banking, and wealth management. Now, why J.P. Morgan continues to be, and I don't want to mislead, and I don't want to say the wrong word. We'll just say these maybe the strongest bank in the country, especially by assets, if you look at that, is because they are there to take over these banks that go under. And I was reading and researching this quite a bit, and they stress in a lot of the resources and research that the government goes through a serious look at what's a good bank to take over these assets, then have assets that have gone insolvent, and so forth and so on. But they go to Jamie Dimon. Now, that's just my opinion. That's what I've seen. And Jamie Dimon knows how the system works. I would feel very comfortable if Jamie Dimon was my chairman, and he's not only the chairman, and he is the CEO. And he's been both the chairman and the CEO since 2005, giving him significant influence over both strategy and board direction of the bank. So if I had to pick what I think, of course you always look at your number one bank, number one company, whatever, but I believe they can back it up. Once again, not a by any stretch a recommendation to move your money there, to start banking with them, anything like that. I'm just giving you a personal opinion. But make no doubt about it, this is an unusual situation where one person has that much power. That's really the best way to put it, CEO and chairman of the board. So what's interesting, 2023, when we did have some banking problems, First Republic Bank went under. And as I think I said this story yesterday, and I think that I've got this right, is that they went under on a Friday, and immediately they turned it into a J.P. Morgan branch very quickly. Turnover was very quickly, and it was just seamless. So it's funny this piece that I'm reading this from. It says this followed a government-run process, not a direct White House directive. I can't imagine any government-run process moving that fast, but that's just me. So typically you don't see it, but that's Jamie Dimon is definitely, I would say, top 5 probably most powerful men in the country for sure. So what do you consider when it comes to switching a bank, picking a new one? I think that there's about 5 or 6 things that you want to consider, and all centers around convenience. First of all, strength. I would definitely make sure the asset size is there. Not that a regional bank or a medium-sized bank or small bank is not a good choice. No, there's a lot of great banks in our communities, and especially on a regional basis. You want to consider asset size and the stability of the bank. I like to think that there is a branch near me. I am literally 5 minutes across the toll road from my bank, and it's a regional sized bank. And I like the fact that I can just scoot over there, and I still am that guy that likes to walk in the doors of a bank and not do everything electronically. I know. But having a branch near you is I think it can be helpful. Diversification of the services that they offer. It's also nice, I think, to be able to build up a relationship with the bank, be there for 10 years, and then say, hey, I want to take a car note. And the bank gets a lot of experience with you and gets to know you as a consumer. And really says, that Joe Smith's great risk, and we probably, based on what's on his credit report, it would be a great loan for a new car or whatever. But I do think that matters once you build up a history with a bank like that. Technology, top of the top things probably you want to be looking at. And there's still some of these banks and some of these financial services companies that have horrible technology. But I would definitely check that part of it out. I know Bank of America really does seem to have a good, really good technology. I haven't looked at all of them by any stretch, but that is just something definitely you want to consider. And then ask a lot of questions about security, and do your research on that. Have they been broken into, hacked into? And what's been the experiences of the bank, and what do they do to stop that from happening? I would be asking lots of questions to make sure that you feel safe and secure about where you are holding your money. So that's some things to think about. And if you wanted to listen to the show from yesterday where we talked about all of the problem banks and that kind of thing, you can always go to prudentmoney.com and listen to it as a podcast or wherever you listen to your podcast on whatever platform. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Listen, if you got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.